Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin on the Twitters, for those of you still holding on to that platform. Uh, Welcome to Hate Week, folks. It is Falcons vs. Saints week 4, the game preview show here. We got a lot to break down because Saints team, a lot better than people anticipated coming into the season. Started off super hot with those 2 big wins. Came back down to earth quite a bit against the Eagles last week in their home stadium, so that was definitely a little bit of a bump in the road there. But who are these Saints? You know, like, are they what we saw in the first couple weeks, or are they what we saw last week? Both of these teams, Falcons and Saints, dealing with a lot of injuries on the offensive line and elsewhere. The Saints in particular had a laundry list of guys miss Wednesday's practice. We'll see how that develops over the course of the rest of the week, but a lot to get to today, a lot of stuff to touch on in what is going to be a absolutely critical game for the NFC South standings, as these two teams and the Falcons will be playing the Bucs next week as well. So a lot of big games coming up. The NFC South gauntlet is about to begin, and the Falcons are going to have to handle this better than they've handled the last couple of weeks if they want to have a chance of taking control of this division early in the season, or if they're going to have to finish strong yet again. And so far, we've been waiting for that strong finish for about 6 years now, and it's never come. So I'd rather get off on the better foot to start things off. But first of all, welcome in, folks. Thanks for joining us. Always appreciate everyone tuning in here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Before we get started with the breakdown, let me bring you a real quick word from our sponsor. It is BetOnline. Once again, folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Last time I looked, the Falcons, the line has moved towards the Falcons with the news of all the Saints injuries that are starting to pile up. It was, I believe, 1.5 point favorites. I think it is maybe 2.5 for the Falcons now. So, you know, still a very close game in the standings, and I think that sort of makes sense. But the over-under actually creeping up in this game, as I think the league is believing a little bit more in the Falcons offense, and of course the Saints were the NFL's highest scoring offense over the first 2 games. So potential shootout, potential defensive slugfest. We don't know, because last week, Eagles game, right? A couple weeks before, it was big money in terms of the offense. So don't know, but no matter what, BetOnline's got every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And if you think you know your stuff, BetOnline's got a new $200,000 mega contest. You pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200,000. And when the game's over, BetOnline's got that new online casino. They got blackjack, they got poker, they got over 150 different online slots games. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today, betonline.ag, to get in on the action. Make sure you sign up using our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get the latest promotion. Bet online, the game starts here. All right. So let's touch on the injuries first before we get too much further into this one, right? At this point, looking at the Falcons, we know that Drew Dahlman has been placed on IR with that high ankle sprain. So that's going to be a 6 to 8 week thing, would be my guess. Possibly longer, right? But Dahlman's out of the picture for a long time. Ryan Newsel comes in. The Falcons also signed former starting center Matt Hennessy to the practice squad. My guess is that he may not be a practice squad elevation this week, but he probably will be going forward until the center situation is more stabilized with Drew Dahlman coming back. So at this point, that is a big one. And then Caleb McGarry, he's officially questionable still. The team described his injury as day-to-day, but I think there's very little chance that McGarry plays this week. So I would assume that Dahlman and McGarry are both out for the Falcons. It's 2 starting offensive linemen out. Dahlman probably the more significant loss because of how much the team relied upon him in the run game and how unique his ability there was. But ultimately, it's they're going to have to overcome it, with at tackle. Storm Norton's filled in pretty well when we've needed him to, but at this stage, this is a tough test coming up. Obviously, he had a tough test last week, played most of the game, did a good job. Another tough test coming. The Saints do have some very good edge rushers out there in Chase Young and Carl Granderson. So we all know Cam Jordan, who seems to be playing more on the inside these days, but still very dangerous player, power rusher. So we'll see how the Falcons weather those. Those are the two big ones right now. Caleb Garrett was the only person that was not practicing on Wednesday. For the Saints, the list is significantly longer. The Saints also just put their center on IR, Eric McCoy, who I believe was the second-ranked center in the NFL. I think Dalman was the third-ranked, so they were neck and neck. He's on IR with a serious groin injury. It seems like, again, that's probably going to be a 6 to 8 week plus injury for him. Doesn't appear to be season ending at this time, but we'll see. Hopefully he's okay and able to return for them at some point. But a laundry list of other injuries as well for this Saints offensive line. Eric McCoy is 100% out. Cesar Ruiz missed practice. He was one of the Saints guards. So he missed practice. We also saw Landon Young, I believe, miss practice, who was one of their reserve offensive linemen. Alvin Kamara missed practice. Demario Davis missed practice. Alante Taylor, who I believe leads the Saints and the NFL in sacks as a blitzer, he missed practice. Now, are all these guys going to miss the game? We don't know that. These were all DNPs on Wednesday, but they still have a couple days to get back to full practice and get out there. But the ones that I would consider like the most concerning, probably Ruiz, probably Davis, considering Davis was listed as a hamstring injury, and those are very temperamental and easy to aggravate, especially early on. So the Saints sort of rushing him back, I think, would be unwise, but I don't know how severe it is. I think Demario Davis is an absolute Iron Man that's going to try to play, so I wouldn't be shocked if he does play, but very easy to aggravate those injuries. And then, the two more interior offensive. I think Landon Young plays some tackle too, but two additional offensive line injuries here. The Saints already had to go to, I believe it was Eli Udoh or Oli Udoh, who really struggled as a pass blocker, and they moved Lucas Patrick over to center, who he's pretty good. I think he's definitely been a good signing for them. So, I think they'll be okay at center without McCoy, obviously going from one of the league's best centers to probably a good, but, not league's best center is a big deal, but they're also having to shuffle potentially both guard spots this week. So that could be a lot. And then Alante Taylor has kind of been their pass rush. So, he's been their leading sacker. I don't think anyone else on that team is close. So without him in the slot, that's definitely a big loss from a pass rush and coverage perspective. But the Saints have a lot of guys that we're going to have to keep an eye on over the next few days, because that could completely change how this team ends up looking on defense and offense. Kamara, is the engine of their offense. We're going to get to that. But without Kamara, they're in huge, huge trouble. So I don't know how serious that is for Kamara. I believe it was hip and ribs listed. It could just be soreness and they're letting him rest, but I mean, that's a very long list of injuries, a lot of stuff going on there for New Orleans. That's definitely going to be something to monitor as we go into week 4. Next up, we're going to go ahead and get started with the matchups in this one, which, I think the Saints have definitely been better, right, than expected. They started really strong. I think they really caught the NFL by surprise with Clint Kubiak's offense, which I think was called very well. But they also got pretty lucky, I think, in terms of they basically hit every deep throw that they attempted to Rashid Shaheed, who is a great player. But, like most big play receivers, the other side of the coin is that you don't complete any of them, and then your passing offense looks anemic. You hit those big plays, you look great. You don't hit them, you look bad. So that's exactly what happened against the Eagles. I believe Rashid was targeted 5 times, 0 catches, and the Saints passing game was held under 150 yards. It did not look good at all. Chris Olave is still good, still a very, capable wide receiver 1, but they don't really have any other options in the passing game than Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. It's a very limited passing attack, and I think that's what the Eagles sort of keyed on, was like, if we just cover those guys, they don't really have anything else in the passing game that can threaten us. I mean, they have Foster Moreau for some dump offs. Kamara out of the backfield is obviously a factor, but those you don't have to cover those like you have to cover top receivers. They don't really have any other receivers that are notable at this point. Juwan Johnson at tight end has been really quiet, not really done a whole lot. I guess Taysom Hill's probably going to be back this week, but at this stage, the Saints offense is hurting a bit. So, this Falcons defense, especially, it's an interesting setup in this game, I guess. If you look at the way that these two teams look, like the Saints look a lot more like you would expect the Falcons to look in terms of what they're doing, right? New Orleans has run the ball 58% of the time so far in 2024. That is absurdly high. Like if you thought the Falcons ran the ball a lot, you'd be wrong, because the Falcons only run the ball 42% of the time. Actually fairly low at this stretch. That has to do with game script and things too. But the Saints, and it has to do with the Saints as well. They've been leading in a lot of these games and been able to sort of pound the ball and bleed clock off. But the Saints, relying on the run a lot and relying on the big play a lot. And it didn't work for them against the Eagles, who we saw the Falcons offense do good things against the Eagles defense and figure out ways to move the ball on the ground, especially. The Saints did not have success doing that for the most part. So, you wonder sort of if the Falcons also run a similar, Fangio-inspired defense, especially on the back end. So you wonder if the Falcons take what the Eagles just did, use that as a blueprint for how to stop this Saints team, which is just crowd the line of scrimmage, put pressure on Carr, make the reads really complicated, sort of, make it all confusing over the middle, and just, double Rashid Shaheed and don't let him get deep throws off. And you can really just sit on the run and sort of suffocate this Saints run game and short passing game. And, we'll see if the Falcons can replicate that. The Falcons run defense after losing Nate Landman has not been very good, but this is another time where they're really going to need to step up in this one, because they're going to be forced to play the run and they're going to have to get it done in this game. And they really need their interior defensive line to step up, especially with the Saints dealing with a ton of moving pieces on the offensive line. Probably going to be looking at 2 new guards with Lucas Patrick at center. And we know Trevor Penning, he hasn't been the worst tackle in the NFL this year, credit to him, but he's very vulnerable as a pass protector. And the Saints are probably going to have to chip for him most plays with Judon out there. The problem is the Falcons just haven't been able to get anything off of their other edge rusher. They just haven't been able to get anything from Carter, Ebiketie, James Smith-Williams. That spot is a huge sore spot, and we all knew this was going to be the case, but it's been pretty glaring. They need more from that position. They need to get at least more against the run. If they can't rush the passer, they need to at least get Zach Harrison out there, tell him to go cut weight and get back out there to play the run or something, because they're getting that position's getting blown off the ball and they're not getting pressure. We need more from that group. Lorenzo Carter having the worst season of his career so far. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get that settled. The other thing is that, I guess I'm not sure what we're going to see from the Saints in terms of how they deploy. I don't know if they're going to go, I'm assuming they're going to go to more 2 tight end stuff with Taysom Hill back, and that will probably open things up for the Falcons to play more base, which should be able to help them against the run. Honestly, their biggest sore spot in the secondary has surprisingly been D. Alford, not Mike Hughes. The slot has been getting carved up. I still have a lot of faith in D. Alford to get right and to sort of figure this out, but that's been a big problem so far, as Alford's just not really been able to be an impact player and has been getting picked on, honestly, by teams. And this is a notoriously difficult coverage scheme to master if you haven't played in it before. It's not the easiest thing in the world, especially for the slot guy. There's a lot of responsibilities there. I think, Alford's probably still learning that stuff. But Antonio Hamilton is back, and he was the understudy, the backup for Alford. So if Alford continues to scuffle, we could see Antonio Hamilton at some point. So I hope that Alford gets it together. I do like Alford a lot. I think he's a very good slot corner. Just so far, it hasn't really worked out in this scheme. So I hope they can get it together. And really, the Falcons just need to get to keep seeing the linebackers take steps forward. I think Anderson, had an encouraging game against the Eagles with some struggles. That's what it's gonna be for Anderson. But I hope he can just take small steps every week. I think he has been. I think in years past he's been more of a liability. I think this year he's not a liability. I think he's just sort of hot. He's just sort of average, right? He's gonna get beat sometimes. He's gonna make plays sometimes. I think all this playing time is good for him. So hopefully by the time Landman comes back, Anderson's playing better, and you feel pretty confident having him back there with Landman, and you can let Ellis become that other edge rusher that you really desperately need right now. But I think those two are going to be okay. We need to get that defensive line settled, because right now we're not getting enough from David Onyemata, especially as a pass rusher. Onyemata against the run has started to come on, which is good, but Onyemata just hasn't been making plays as a pass rusher. We need him. We need him really bad. And Jarrett has been good, but outside, I think week 1 he was amazing. Week 2, slower. Week 3, a little slower. Still makes plays, but not. Neither one of those guys are dominating like we hope that they will. They will eventually. And then Eddie Goldman at nose tackle has been solid, but they're probably going to need to have the nose tackle in more. I think against the Chiefs, the game plan was a little bit different. I can't remember exactly how many snaps they shared, but so far, like, there's been a lot of rotating in there, and I think they just haven't quite figured out the best sequence of these guys yet. So I hope they can figure something out. I hope they can figure out a solution that works, because Derek Carr is a quarterback that is quite vulnerable to pressure, and that's been the case throughout his entire career. If you can get pressure on him, he will make mistakes. He will be sloppy. If you let him sit back there and get comfortable, he can absolutely dice you up. He is very good at throwing the football when he's not pressured. So that's going to be key for the Falcons in this game. They're going to have to find a way to get pressure, and they're going to have to do it, while keeping some guys back to cover Rashid Shaheed deep shots. That is what the Saints offense wants to do. They want to hit the big play, because as we saw against the Eagles, they actually kind of struggled to string drives together and keep things going. So I think they're going to struggle in the run game with 2 reserve guards in and a new center. And they're probably going to have some pass protection issues and communication issues in there as well. So the Falcons need to wreak havoc up front. And if they do that, I think they have a great chance in this game, because they got the NFL's best safety duo back there in Bates and Simmons that are probably licking their chops, hoping to get some errant passes. If the Falcons can just get some pressure, I think these 2 safeties can take over games. And we've seen them contribute in a huge way to obviously the win against the Eagles. They gave the Falcons a legit chance against the Chiefs, shutting down a scoring drive, obviously, with Simmons picking the end zone. So, they're going to need those 2 guys in a big way. They're going to need them every week. But, I do think that Terrell had a bounce-back game last week. I think he played well. And Mike Hughes, I think, has been tested now. He's going to continue to be tested. But I think, we don't have to worry so much about Hughes being a giant liability anymore. I know that was a huge concern coming into the season. At this point, doesn't look like Hughes is a big problem. I think it looks like he's a good cornerback too. So that's one thing solved. Now we have to figure out what's going on with the pass rush in the interior, and figure out that edge spot next to Judon, because that seems to be the big question mark now. The secondary is playing well. Linebackers have been a little bit up and down. They lost their best run defender. That's been problematic. But I think those 2 are going to, I think Anderson, the more he plays, hopefully we'll see him continue to look good. So let's move on now to how this Falcons offense is going to take on the New Orleans Saints defense. So Atlanta, starting in week 2, Atlanta's offense went to 11 personnel as the base and basically played it every single snap. And that has worked well for them in spurts. I think this last game against the Chiefs, the offense was playing its best game up until the 2 offensive line injuries in the span of 4 plays. And that caused things to fall apart basically for an extended part of the game until they started to kind of find their footing a little bit in the 4th quarter. And that's just what happens. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. He sees the center go out. He sees the right tackle go out. He unleashed the fury on the Falcons. He dialed up all the blitz packages, everything, to try to keep this Falcons offense off schedule. And he succeeded basically until the end of the game. The Falcons should have had an opportunity, 4 opportunities from the 1, to try to punch that score in and make that game, make the Chiefs really sweat that one, and possibly even win, right? The Falcons. They didn't get that opportunity, but the offense has been taking steps forward. So they're hopefully, with Newsel getting an opportunity to play with the starters, same thing with Norton, they'll be a little bit more in sync in the run game, and they'll be able to be more prepared for these blitz packages that Dennis Allen's going to send. So one thing I will say that I think is an interesting idea is, first of all, we need to know if Alontae Taylor's playing. If Alontae Taylor's playing, he's been their slot corner. he's a good slot corner. He's been particularly good as a pass rusher. He's been elite there. As an actual coverage player, not as good, right? You're not as concerned about that, but he's been a absolutely lethal blitzer, one of the best pass rushing players in the NFL, definitely the best cornerback pass rusher. So at this stage, I wonder if the Falcons, if Alontae Taylor does play, I do wonder if the Falcons consider not putting a third receiver out there and making the Saints change what they want to do. And the other flip side of this is, does Demario Davis play? Because Demario Davis is the heart and soul of that defense. They are not even close to the same defense without him. He's probably the most important player. Maybe him and Kamara at this stage are the most important guys to watch, because Kamara is so integral to what they want to do on offense. If they don't have Kamara, that offense is going to be in big trouble. They are utterly reliant on Kamara for so much of what they want to do. Demario Davis is kind of the same guy on their defense, and like, no slander intended. Like, he's been awesome. He's been a tremendous signing for them. He's kind of their defensive leader and the heart and soul. You know, he's been a great addition, and he's been a pain in the Falcons' ass for many years. If he doesn't play, that's obviously a huge loss. The other side of that coin is, if Alontae Taylor's in and Demario Davis is out, it's pretty obvious what you want to do, and that's to take Taylor off the field and make the Saints put more depth linebackers on the field. And the Falcons can accomplish that by doing what they did in week 1, which was to play 12 personnel, to play Pitts and Werner, and to take Ray off the field, which, you know, Ray's been good. Like, don't get me wrong. I know they like what they have there, but you got 2 backup offensive linemen in. You're probably going to want Werner to help chip for Norton on one side. And then that can free up Kyle Pitts to go out and do stuff, right? And be that extra receiver. Like, I think this is the week where you want to get that 12 personnel going and help out your offensive line with that extra tight end and Werner, who's the actual blocker, not Kyle Pitts, and rely on London and Mooney to go make plays, and Kyle Pitts, lean on Pitts as much as you can, and hopefully that extra blocker will help in the run game too. And what it's going to do is going to take Alontae Taylor off the field, and it's going to force the Saints to probably use an extra linebacker to try to stop the run, to match up with that bigger personnel. And if they're already down Davis, they're going to have Willie Gay on the field, who has not played well so far this year. He has played well in the past, but they're going to have to go down the depth chart even more at linebacker. I believe at this point the guy that would probably come out there is Anthony Orji, who I don't know too much about. I believe he was a 2023 UDFA, but so far, when in like the handful of snaps he's played, mostly on special teams, he's been solid. I believe he's played like 15 snaps on defense or something like that. So, he's a solid. I'm sure he's going to be a reasonable depth player, but you'd rather have him out there than you would, the best pass rusher on the Saints right now, which is crazy, but it is, it is Alontae Taylor. So, at this stage, I think that's the way I would go with it. That's how I would attack the Saints, is to go to base package, help out your pass protection, and try to run the ball. This offense needs to run the ball. They're going to have more trouble without Drew Dahlman. There's no doubt about that. But you got to find a way to make it work. You got to find a way to have success. So that's the way I would look at it. It's not that you have to play, base the entire game or something, but if they do have to take Paulson Adebo off the field, if he's not in there, then I think you have more flexibility about what you want to do. But they're not going to go at 100% 12 personnel or, anything like that. But I do think that's an interesting wrinkle. It would be an unscouted look for the most part. The Falcons really only used 12 personnel for a little bit in week 1. And then, obviously we know that the Falcons changed to going to 11 in the second half of that game and basically stuck with it ever since. But I think if you could slow down the Saints pass rush, you can have success against this team. And we saw the Eagles have success on the ground against this team. So I think that's where you're looking to go, especially if Davis is out. You want to pound the rock, not let the Saints secondary take over things. This is going to be a hard team to pass the ball against. They do have very good corners, and they do have a very good safety in Tyrann Mathieu. So I would lean on Kyle Pitts. This is a potential good game for him here. And run the ball as much as you can and keep that pass rush at bay. Because I think this Saints defensive line, they've rushed the passer well. They have not been as good against the run. Nathan Shepard hasn't been that great. Brian Bazee has been a huge liability against the run. And again, Chase Young, good pass rusher, not so great as a run defender. So you're probably looking to take advantage of that. Obviously, you're down two of your better run blockers, but you got to find a way to make it work. Maybe that's leaning more on that left side. Maybe that's using Charlie Warner. Maybe that's, doing more interesting things with two running backs or whatever. But that's how I would go about attacking the Saints defense, which is a very good defense. But without Demario Davis, again, you're going to want to attack that team in his absence because he is so key to everything they want to do back there. So I think this is going to be a good game. Takeaways here, summary type stuff. This has gotten to be a very interesting game, probably going to be one of the most watched games in that 1 o'clock hour. It's a critical game for the standings. It's a critical game for morale for both teams, and I think the NFL is going to be watching. Like it's going to be, are the Saints legit? We watched the Saints dominate for 2 weeks and then go out and lay an egg at home against the Eagles, where the Eagles really tried hard to gift the Saints that game over and over and over again, with just miscues and bad plays and bad throws and just all these things. And they couldn't get it done. The Eagles, managed to storm back and win that game. And really limit what the Saints wanted to do on offense. Holding the Saints to just 12 points a week after the Falcons, put up a lot of yards on that team. So, I think that's concerning for a lot of people to see such a big shift. And then the Falcons, they've played the hardest schedule in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. You could look at any measure, and that's absolutely the case. The Falcons have played an absolute gauntlet so far. The Saints have played the 23rd schedule. Don't forget they beat up on a Panthers team that started Bryce Young and, basically provided no resistance whatsoever. Then they played a Dallas Cowboys defense that's looking like it might be one of the worst in the league. Are the Falcons that bad on offense? I don't think so. They're definitely not this offensive powerhouse or anything. They've sort of been a defensive first team so far, which I think is a big shock to pretty much everyone. But the Falcons offense needs to start to find their footing. This is at home. This is one of those games where you can expect Falcons fans to show up. The Saints games, Falcons fans, to their credit, Falcons fans are going to show up for these games. They're going to cheer this team on. So they should have the crowd on their side. The Falcons should be in a friendly environment. And this is a huge game. The NFL is looking to see, like, okay, the Falcons have faced a huge test. They took the defending champs to the wire. They managed to come back and defeat the Eagles in Philly, which is one of the hardest games to win in the NFL. And they got, they held the Steelers to, a score, and that offense just looked completely out of sync that game. And they clearly were rusty from the preseason, but the Steelers are 3-0. So, you can slander them as much as you want, but they're beating everybody they play so far. So at this stage, these Falcons, it's going to be like probably whoever wins this game, and then the Bucs are playing the Eagles this week too. So, after this week, we'll have seen all three of these teams against the Eagles with a chance to see the Saints to Falcons head to head. You have to think if the Bucs were to lose to the Eagles and the Falcons come out on top in this game, that the Falcons suddenly take over as being the front runner, which would be nice, right? Obviously, we got a long way to go, and even if the Falcons lose this game, it's far from over in this division. But critical game for Atlanta, for the standings, for the morale, for the NFL cognoscenti, sort of looking at them. And critical game for the Saints too, that, whoever wins this game is probably coming out of this feeling like they're the front runner for the NFC South. A lot more games to play, a lot to get to, but the fact is that the Falcons have the easiest schedule going forward, and the Saints and Bucs, especially the Bucs, do not. So, long way to go. This is where things get real, though. This is where, we said it before the season, and we'll say it again. The first 3 weeks for this Falcons team, not that important, in terms of the standings, in terms of all that stuff. The most important game was the Eagles, and they won. That's the one that actually matters. Not just for the conference, tiebreaker, but for the head-to-head win against a team that you could be fighting for playoff position with them. And that head-to-head win could mean the difference between playing the easiest team in the playoffs or one of the hardest teams, in terms of the wild card. So it could be absolutely critical, that win. It's a big deal. But at this stage, we still have a lot to learn about the Falcons and the Saints. And I think this is a real gut check, game for both teams, that we need to see what you got now that these are starting to matter. this is critical. So let's see what the Falcons have. I hope that Atlanta can get this done. It would be a big deal, right? If they could get this win. It's huge. It's huge for everything. I think that they will. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be sweaty, but I think the Falcons find a way to grind this one out over their rivals. But what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments what you think. I think who plays obviously is big. How many of these Saints players actually start? That is something that has to be monitored. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Leave your comments. Please like, subscribe if you haven't done that. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And yeah, if you want to support the show, you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/FalcoholicLive, as well as in the YouTube channel memberships. We appreciate that. We'll be back for the post-game show following on Sunday on Falcoholic Live here on YouTube to break down this game in detail, hopefully celebrating that big dub. But either way, we'll be here. We'll be here for the group therapy session or the group celebration, one way or the other. You guys can count on us. So thanks again for joining me. I'm Kevin Knight of Falcoholic Kevin here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Thanks again to Bet Online for sponsoring the show, and we will see you next time. Have a great day, folks.